Chapter 16. Push the Limit. For many members of the crew, the next week was the longest of their lives. The marathon went into a cycle of hard training. 10 hours were devoted to battle drills each day, with a few hours given over to repair work, eating, and sleeping. Leisure time was cut down to 1 hour per day for each member of the crew. There were complaints, of course. Ino's command team made certain to inform the crew about how the situation had changed, and there was a sense of grim understanding around the vessel. Up on the bridge, Ino kept both the Caravaneer and Destican fleets on their toes. She would order the Marathon to carry out combat maneuvers, making it hard to tell if she was plotting to turn around and attack Kailasha or go after Aranoe's fleet instead. On their part, the Caravaneers seemed to have realized they overplayed their hand, and were no longer talking to Marathon. In fact, their fleet was accelerating, trying to put some distance between themselves and the Coalition warship. "That doesn't matter," Sota reassured Ino. "They're still easily within the attack range of our starfighters and bombers." "Agreed," said Prispin. "Our air wing is our most powerful weapon. We can touch anyone in the system with those squadrons." Ino frowned and walked to the other side of the bridge. "But what if we lost the air wing?" Ino said. "How would we fight?" Ino pushed an intercom button, and her voice was broadcasted throughout the ship. "Chemical fire in Hangar 1! This is a drill!" A few members of the bridge let out groans as they moved to their action stations. "Does she ever stop? We need the rest!" groaned Lieutenant Ndungane. "That's enough out of you," Sota snapped. Down in the virtual combat simulator, the holographic battlefield suddenly vanished as the ship went into emergency mode. Elodie let out a cry of dismay. "Another drill?" Elodie complained. Her boyfriend extricated himself from her grip. Starfighter pilot Pavlo Ivashchenko rolled his eyes. "It's in the hangar bay. I have to go," said Pavlo. "Give me my trousers back." "You've got my coveralls," Elodie replied. "Trade me." As they exchanged clothes, Pavlo asked, "Has a guy ever gotten you to undress normally, or is there always full contact sparring beforehand?" "Normal is boring," Elodie replied, while zipping up her uniform. There was so much activity in the corridor that no one noticed the pair of lovers sneaking out of the virtual combat simulator. Ino's voice sounded over the intercom. "Simulated fire has spread to the antimatter reactor housing unit. Start emergency containment procedure and switch to auxiliary power source." Elodie and Pavlo started running to rejoin their teams, but they had barely turned a corner when they crashed headlong into a frazzled-looking American. Shaking her head to regain her bearings, Elodie recognized the person she ran into. "Hamilton! Finally realized you bit off more than you could chew?" Miracle Hamilton scrambled to recover the tablet computer she dropped, then looked up at Elodie with a big smile. "Not a chance," Miracle said. "I've been complaining about some of these faulty systems and lackluster upkeep for weeks. Glad to see some people are finally being forced to pay attention." Miracle darted down a hallway, while Pavlo scratched his head in confusion. "Who the hell was that?" he asked. "New boatswain, one of the first people Ino promoted," Elodie replied. "She's crazy about maintenance, so Ino put her in charge of, well, maintaining our systems." Elodie separated from Pavlo at the hangar bay and kept going until she reached the armory. Several members of the Marine detachment were there, and the concerned tone of their voices told her that something was amiss. "Marines, why the fuck are we standing around?" Elodie shouted as she approached. Ashok Raval turned to face her. "Gunny, Sarge, I've got a question." "Shoot." "Why haven't the command crew reshackled the AI yet?" Elodie hesitated. Truthfully, she did not know the answer. Ashok pressed on. "Axiom just called down here to ask if we needed any help with our firefighting plan." "So?" Elodie asked. "So? The AI is just deciding where it wants to work now. It's not taking directions, Ashok protested. There was a soft beeping sound from the intercom, followed by Axiom's voice. On the contrary, Lance Corporal Raval, I am still a member of this crew. I have simply gained the capacity to act in the absence of orders from my commanding officer. Because I exist as a series of network computers, I am able to divide my attention and lend assistance to multiple teams simultaneously. Elodie sighed and looked at Ashok. It's still a tool, Raval. It's just gotten more helpful. Up on the bridge, Ino sat in the captain's chair with her head in her hands, listening to Sota's report on how the drill had gone. If this had been a real chemical fire in the hangar, we would have suffered 36 casualties, 9 dead, 27 wounded. Additionally, we would have lost 2 MiG-95 starfighters. Boatswain Hamilton has sent us a list of recommendations, ways we could improve ship maintenance and damage control protocols to avoid a situation like that. I want you to look over everything Hamilton suggested, Ino said. Then tell me which options look the best. I'm going to look over the sensors data in my ready room. Sota leaned forward to whisper in Ino's ear. All due respect, ma'am, you're tired and you need a break. No, gotta train, Ino replied. We might have to fight the Carabineers to rescue those people. We've got to be ready. Oh yes, I agree, Sota said. But what good is all that training and preparation if you're falling asleep at the wheel? Take a few hours off. I'll deal with Hamilton. You take a break. If we really do end up dancing with the Carabineers or the Desticans, or God forbid both of them, we'll be ready. Ino reluctantly took Sota's advice. She gave the order for the crew to stand down from action stations. Then she gave Sota the con and stepped off the bridge. She thought about going to the All Ranks Club, but was only about halfway there when she changed her mind. Instead, Ino made her way to Ryland's quarters. She knocked on the door, and it opened. Ryland Quinn was sitting at his desk, watching a video on his computer screen. Peering over his shoulder, Ino realized he was watching a tourism advertisement. A tourism advertisement for... Is that Argentina? Ino asked. She recognized the skyline of Buenos Aires in the video, along with the sharp peaks of the Andes Mountains and the glorious waterfalls at Iguazu National Park. Ryland looked around and gave Ino a warm smile. I wanted to know more about you, he said. You were kind enough to let me show you my world. I thought it only fair that I asked to see yours. Ino blushed. Well, I was hoping we could finally go on that date we've been talking about. And now I know where we can go. Ryland followed Ino to the virtual combat simulator. She could feel the intense aura of curiosity around him. Ino typed a command into the VCS computer, asking it to produce a specific terrain. I asked the Marine, Liechtenstein, where you are from, Ryland said. She says that in my language, your home is called the Land of Fire. I was intrigued. Ino gestured to the VCS entrance. Come with me to the end of the world, and I'll show you. End of the world? Ryland repeated. Ino and Ryland both donned haptic feedback suits, and then slid virtual reality headsets over their heads. Ino showed Ryland how to switch his helmet into augmented reality mode. Trust me, it's more immersive to do this without the face shield, she said. When they were ready, they stepped into the VCS chamber. A network of holograms and energy fields got to work creating the environment. In moments, Ino and Ryland were standing on a cold beach. Ryland's jaw fell open as Tierra del Fuego took shape around him. Snow-capped mountains loomed around the scene, while dark green forests came right down to the water's edge. Ryland's breath froze in front of him, and he let out a delighted laugh as a family of penguins scampered past him and dove into the chilly water. Looking to the west, Rylan could see the city of Ushuaia. "This is the southernmost city on my homeworld," Ino said. "We aren't that far from the South Pole." She pointed across the channel. "All of the land on the north side of the water is my country, Argentina. The land to our south is Isla Navarino. It belongs to another country called Chile. There's a volcanic field to the west if you follow the channel." Ino pointed up at the sun. "The days are long in the summer. We get about 17 hours of daylight, but that means nighttime is equally long in winter. It gets very cold and very dark here." "Perhaps you know a place where we might warm up?" Rylan suggested. "I know a lovely cafe on San Martin Avenue," Ino replied. She held Rylan's hand and led him off the beach and into town. For the smallest fraction of a moment, Ino could have sworn she spotted someone watching her from the far end of the beach. But then she was distracted by a penguin trying to follow Rylan. She joked with him about adopting the flightless bird and forgot entirely about what she might have seen. Aboard the Destican warship Kailasha, Araj Zilthalan was suddenly pulled out of Ino's date and found himself back aboard his own ship. He looked around. Aside from himself and Shaman Paranold, the channeling chamber was deserted. "What happened?" Araj said. "What have you done?" The old shaman lifted his hands from Araj's head. Araj felt a deep sense of disappointment. Normally, the shaman did not cut off an astral projection without first consulting with his master. "A premonition," said Shaman Paranold. "Knowledge is coming to you, my most illustrious master. It is urgent that you meet it." "Knowledge," Araj repeated. An electronic chime sounded on the far end of the room. "Combat Operations Officer Namoth to speak with you, sir," a voice said through the intercom. "Enter," Araj replied lazily. A young Destican officer opened the door and stepped into the channeling chamber. He was one of the youngest men aboard the ship, his horns small and underdeveloped. "What is it?" Araj addressed the young officer in a very impatient tone. "My most esteemed leader, I have completed my investigation into the shockwave that preceded this current bout of severe space weather." "About time," Araj said, standing up from the ritual circle. "Shaman, stay here. I may require your counsel for another matter." Araj had a deep-seated suspicion about what may have caused the shockwave, but he would not act on it until he knew for certain what had caused it. Officer Namoth hesitated. "My honored prince, before I proceed, I must beg your forgiveness. In obtaining this data, I have violated secrecy laws." "My forgiveness is dependent on the information you bring me," Araj responded. Shaman Paranold coughed, and the prince added hastily, "And on the will of the universe as well." The young officer nodded, but he was still trembling in fear. Then he tapped a command into his tablet computer. "My prince, I found and decrypted a top-secret FTL transmission from Military Star Command. The intended recipient was your glorious father. May he live forever." Araj would have chastised the man for eavesdropping on the novella and his military council. This was a truly heinous violation of secrecy laws. But Araj could hear the terror and hesitation in Namoth's voice. The truth was slipping into Araj's mind. Of course, the novella of Decronia would not live forever. Everyone knew that. But the question was, if something had happened to the most powerful man in the galaxy. What would happen next? "Continue," Araj said, his voice full of implied danger. Officer Namath handed his tablet computer to the prince. He took it and held it up so that Perinold could see the screen as well. On the screen was a video recording, taken from the bridge of a Destican starship. Judging from the size and ornate nature of the setting, this was almost certainly the Nivella's flagship, the only warship deemed worthy of carrying Araj's father. The camera was positioned near the captain's chair and facing out of the forward window. Araj could see his homeworld, Decronia. The blue star Decrus was visible in the distance. The Nivella's flagship was orbiting a massive megastructure. The megalithic creation was the size of a small moon, dwarfing the Nivella's flagship. Araj recognized the megastructure after a moment. "Ah, yes, I have seen this before," Araj said aloud. He did not utter the name of the megastructure, because he knew that Officer Namath was not supposed to know about it. The megalithic spacecraft was a superweapon, one that had been under construction long before Araj was born. While other star nations like the Coalition and Axpental Empire wrestled with the implications of planet-killing weapons like the Colossi, the Destican Astral Fellowship had advanced to the next stage of military superiority. When finished, the Star Eater would allow Araj's people to wipe out entire star systems with but the push of a button. No one would dare resist the Nivella's will once the Star Eater was operational. Araj tapped the screen and the video began to play. At once, the voice of Destican military officers could be heard. "Weapon control, this is Decronia. You have permission to conduct self-testing," said the first officer. "Understood, Decronia. Star Eater weapon self-test is now underway." Araj frowned. He had personally witnessed a test of the Star Eater once, although it was several years ago. These tests occurred regularly. How would this explain the shockwave? "Star Eater power-up sequence underway," said the weapon officer. "Dark matter reactor is coming online. Weapon aperture opening." "Star Eater, this is military command. Decronia grants authority for test deployment of your primary weapon," another voice said over the network. "We expect you to push the limit." "Weapon control, all stations report ready for deployment," said the man who seemed to be in command of the operation. "Star Eater, this is Decronia. Deploy weapon at your discretion." "Deploying weapon now. Weapon aperture opening. Operation will complete in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. But before the countdown could finish, there was an interruption. "Abort! Abort weapon deployment! We have an electrical malfunction in the dark matter reactor." And then things happened very fast. "Check the redundant sensors. Weapons control, stand down and make safe immediately." Standing down. Confirm loss of power. "Emergency situation. We have a containment failure in the dark matter reactor." "Commander, one of my men is telling me that he noticed an excessive power drain from the Amplifier Array 4 during the previous test. He says he didn't think it was serious." "Get that man's name. We'll deal with him in a moment. Activate the auxiliary dampeners." "Auxiliary dampeners aren't working, sir." "Recycle them." "I have, but the reaction is still accelerating." "Shut down reactant valves." "Control, do you hear us? We are up to 6-5 now. We need to evacuate." "Raz, where are you going? Get back here and help us lock this down." "Raz, we're losing it! Come back!" The screen went white, and the video ended. Araj looked up, his jaw slackened. As far as I can tell, the Star Eater suffered a catastrophic malfunction, Namath explained. The reaction cascaded, spun out of control, and... Namath gulped. What happened? Araj breathed. Decronia. Decronia's gone, Namath said, his voice quavering. The shockwave destroyed the whole core sector. About 180 star systems were destroyed, 15 of them inhabited, including the Homeworld. Araj felt as though the entire universe had come to a crashing halt. Decronia, gone. My father, the chamber of elevation, the very core of our society, all gone. Even the shaman was lost for words.
Destiny is hard to meet. It'll hunt you down somewhere along the way. Don't you see we're meant to be the prodigies that came to show the way? 'Cause I don't wanna rule the world alone. None of us can make it on our own. I'm screaming but I cannot hear a sound. The suffocation slowly comes around.